Torrential rainfall in the last 24 hours has led to flooding in at least 5 states, with Selangor being the worst hit.
This is knee-deep waters that we're talking about here.
The damage is extensive.
In December 2021, Malaysia was hit by the worst floods in decades. At least 54 people were declared dead, and thousands were forced to evacuate their homes. 8 out of 11 states in Peninsular Malaysia were badly hit. The government estimated that it caused 6.1 billion ringgit worth of damage and losses. Now, imagine trying to hold a nationwide election during all of this. Some are afraid that this will be a real possibility for the upcoming Malaysian general election. On the 10th of October, Malaysian PM Ismail Sabri Yaakob announced the dissolution of parliament, calling for an early election. Malaysia's 15th general election, or GE15, was supposed to be held by September 2023. But now, GE15 must be held within the next 60 days from the PM's announcement. This coincides with Malaysia's northeast monsoon season, which typically stretches from November to March every year. The December 2021 floods were dubbed a once-in-a-100-years weather event, but Malaysia might be seeing history repeat itself soon. According to the Malaysian Meteorological Department, heavy rain and thunderstorms could be expected from October to November. Even now, flash floods are already beginning to make an appearance. Parts of Kota Kinabalu, Ipoh and Johor Bahru were badly affected by heavy rain recently. The MMD's Deputy Director General has said that GE15 should not be held during the northeast monsoon, and that weather conditions are less than favourable. Many other politicians and figures have also spoken up. The Health Minister has expressed concern, saying that governments by convention would usually avoid calling for polls at a time like this. A member of the opposition PKR party called the move selfish and illogical. On Twitter, #Kerajaan Gagal and #Undi Banjir trended in Malaysia on the day of the PM's announcement, with many expressing anger and disappointment at the government's decision. So, why continue to hold the elections anyway, despite all the warnings and the backlash? Here are some factors that could be at play.
So UMNO won very big late last year in Malacca, and early this year they won very big in Johor as well. So they feel quite strongly that they really have the momentum.
The rush for an election could also be motivated by the rapidly rising cost of living, the weakening Malaysian ringgit, and an economy that's still recovering from the effects of the pandemic. In short, it's not looking too good right now, and things are probably going to get worse. So an election that's held now before a further economic downturn could be advantageous for UMNO. Malaysian politics have been plagued with internal struggles and instability since the last general election. So a strong, decisive victory for our party could bring an end to all of that. The Prime Minister said that he was calling an election to end questions over the legitimacy of his government. His government was criticised as a backdoor government because his Barisan Nasional Coalition lost the 2018 election to Pakatan Harapan. But defecting MPs collapsed the PH government in 2020. And in 2021, enough MPs withdrew their support from the previous Prime Minister, allowing Ismail Sabri Yaakob to take power.
I think we live in an age where people don't like it if you form a government through negotiations, or what they call backdoor government. So in other words, if governments are formed after a general election, generally people see that as a legitimate government.
But some are also saying that the concerns of floods are overblown. Analysts say that opposition politicians are using the monsoon season to justify their calls to delay the election. According to this professor, the actual reason is PH is simply not ready.
Because if you look at last year, they had elections in the state of Sarawak in December, and Malacca just a few weeks before that. So if they can hold elections successfully during the monsoon season last year, what makes this year different? The only problem that's related to flooding, if the flood situation gets very bad, is that you can expect a lower turnout. But in some ways, a lower turnout is actually better for UMNO, because we know that if there's a lower turnout, it's always good for the government, bad for the opposition. Because for the opposition to overthrow the incumbent, you usually need a huge turnout.
It's clear that GE15 is an incredibly crucial election for Malaysia's future, and it's one that many people around the world will be watching closely.
For Malaysians, they found that the last few years, since 2018, has been a very difficult few years. Top of the COVID pandemic, you had a lot of political instability. Since 2018, you had 3 different governments and 3 different prime ministers. And I think a lot of Malaysians understand that for a country to move forward, especially during the recovery phase, you really need a stable government.